Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Game Theory's Ask the Experts, where we have informal conversations with marketers and marketing effectiveness practitioners. My name's Claudia Sestinia, and I'm the Global CMO at Game Theory. Before we start, a little bit about Game Theory. We're a global marketing effectiveness consultancy that empowers marketing and insight professionals to make agile decisions using data, technology, and advanced analytics. Today's theme is about the decisions that we make as marketers to drive business growth. So, understanding what's happened, why it happened, and what will happen. You'll be able to ask questions on the chat functionality at any time, and we will come to them during the session. So, I'm delighted to be welcoming two guests today. Firstly, Ajay Ahuja from Kellogg's Insights and Analytics team, who has over a decade of experience in CPG. At Kellogg's, he is tasked with answering key business questions, such as the ones I mentioned just a second ago. Ajay recently spoke at a ThinkBox event about how Kellogg's are accelerating analytics and their journey to do so. And currently, Ajay is working on future-proofing the business in these interesting and uncertain times. The second guest that we have here today is Chris Sloane, who's a senior partner at Game Theory. Chris has almost 2 decades of experience in marketing effectiveness and partners with many of our clients working with Ajay at Kellogg's. Chris has written extensively about the media landscape in AdMap and Walk, talking about advertising frequency and many other topics. So let's start. Before we kick into the really deep questions, I'm really curious to hear from Ajay and Chris with a little bit of a fun icebreaker. Let's go to Ajay first of all. Ajay, hello and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us here today, and appreciate you taking the time out of your really busy schedule. Why don't we kick off with a little bit of fun? Describe your career in a length of a tweet.
First of all, Claudia, thank you very much for inviting me on this. It's a great opportunity, so thank you very much for that. And in terms of experience, I would just say, I've worked with Nielsen in a variety of roles, from analytics, from reporting, working in various continents. So I had worked in China, South Africa, Australia. So quite a lot of large remit in the global teams. And then recently, as you mentioned, what happened, why it happened, all of those kind of questions within Kellogg's, utilizing the help from our experts at Game Theory with Chris and his extended team. And I don't know, something about me, something like that. Well, I like cycling. That's my passion. I'm doing a Dublin to Paris 1,000-kilometer charity cycle at the moment. I'm about 35% done, and I enjoy badminton. Those are the things that are outside of work that I like. Sorry, I must have broken the tweet length character limit.
You've literally broken all of the tweet length characters. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ajay. So Chris, try and stick to the brief, please, here, unlike Ajay. Chris, if your career was made into a book, what would the title be?
Interesting. Yeah, quite a different one. I mean, I was having a think about possible book titles, and I've come up with a real one. I've come up with if I had to condense my career into a book title, it would be The Hobbit. And this is not because I'm 3 foot tall and have got furry toes, but the subtitle of that book, initially at least, was There and Back Again, which I think encapsulates my career quite nicely. I spent my initial years working for OHAL, which was a company doing marketing analytics that existed as we merged into Game Theory, and then spent 4 years in Australia heading up business science department in Melbourne before coming back to work for Game Theory. So either The Hobbit or There and Back Again, either works for me.
Brilliant. Fantastic, Chris. Thank you very much. Right, let's get into the meaty stuff. Now, when we talk about sort of media and marketing, I think there's sort of right now, obviously, media and marketing, marketers being under major stress test, and the role of media marketing is sort of evolving overall anyway, but also right now the role of media marketing within the overall sales drivers will depend on what sector you're in. Now, I'd love to start with Ajay. From your perspective at Kellogg's as an organization, how do you continue to think about media and marketing within the overall sales drivers?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Claudia. I like the title of the book, Chris. I think as an organization, it's very typical to any other organization, right? We want to drive awareness, we want to drive saliency, but at the same time, you want to create that long-lasting effect on your consumers and your shoppers. So these are, if I was to describe it in one sentence, it would be driving awareness and saliency, but obviously there is a lot more to it, which is where I think the help from Chris and game theory and the extended team comes in, which is how you utilize the data to A, have that lasting effect, and B, also have a high profit ROI as such. So your return is also there. So when you are asking for those marketing and media investments, you're driving awareness, but you're being profitable at the same time. And I could take an example from our strategy as such, right? So we have a deploy for growth strategy within Kellogg, and one of the growth boosters within that strategy is called building world-class brands. And media and marketing is one of the levers that we kind of utilize for those kind of growth boosters as such. So yeah, it's a key lever. It's in our strategy and it's built in. So it's from, at least this is from Kellogg's perspective,
Fantastic, brilliant. Thanks, Ajay. Now, Chris, from your perspective, from a broad perspective of the media landscape, but also what the role of media marketing from an effectiveness standpoint. What are your thoughts there in terms of how media marketing can affect sales drivers now, perhaps compared to pre-COVID?
It's interesting. There's clearly been changes in how media and marketing can affect sales at the moment. Inevitably, some businesses were shut completely for 2-3 months in the UK, and similar stories around Europe and the globe. And clearly, bricks and mortar related business, you're not going to be selling anything. Other businesses did really well, at least in some stages of lockdown. Staple products, things that people needed to buy, things that they still could buy, clearly did very well, at least in those initial stages. I mean, we're kind of seeing three sort of time horizons through this sort of COVID-19 period, and one was that sort of initial lockdown period, the 2, 3, 4 weeks around when restrictions came in, not just in the UK, but as I say, sort of much wider than that, and what was happening then. And some companies, people were rushing out to sort of panic buy, stockpile goods, pantry stocking, getting as much as they could in that period. In the short term, some companies did very well. Other companies, clearly, because they were closed, did not. In that second period, it's more about the medium term. What happens after that initial rush out to buy products? This was in sort of the April, sort of May period. Some businesses were still closed. Others had opened, were continuing to sell, but they might have been selling less because of sort of stockpiling that was happening initially. But at the same time, you've got many more people working from home. Their consumption patterns have changed. And then almost most importantly is how this is going to play out over the next 6 months, next year, 2 years, 5 years, this much longer term. And that's going to be critical for now. Recession coming, we'll talk about that more later on, I'm sure. But you've got 3 distinct periods about what the underlying sort of dynamics of the market have shifted in different companies. And sort of commentators, people in our industry have been saying sort of two things in this period, where it seems to me that one is that don't cut your brand marketing spend. You need to sort of spend your way out of this period. That's great, but the finance director might not agree with you. And the second is around accelerate your digital transformation, bring things online to make sure that you can sort of harvest the demand where that lies. Clearly, at the moment, we don't know how that longer term is playing out. That will come up in sort of the weeks and months to come. But I think overridingly, things can work the same. The fundamentals haven't shifted, but work out what has changed for your business over the next sort of 6 to 12 months. Are people still going to desire your products? Is there a way that you can sort of spend your way out, pushing people online or whatever? And clearly, when it comes to finding out what's most important over this period, the words of the WHO chief at the start of all this: test, test, test. This is going to be critical to find out what is working. Are the fundamentals still applying in your business, and how do you sort of optimize into the future?
That's great, fantastic, and you picked up on a couple of things there, and especially around sort of what consumers want, the different phases, and I'm curious, Ajay, around what initiatives Kellogg's have been looking at from a kind of empathetic marketing point of view. If you can tell us a little bit more about that, be quite curious to hear a bit more about that one.
Absolutely. I think I'll touch slightly upon what Chris was saying around post-COVID, right? So obviously our products are more appealing to consumers and shoppers now because obviously they are safe, they are hygiene, they are well-known products for like over 100 years. So when you have these kind of attributes associated to the food offering that you're putting out in the market, then you're not limited to just driving value for the organization. And specifically in the time of this post-COVID, as Chris mentioned about the point, during this post-COVID, it's not just about value. Our products are anyways appealing, and we can see the in-home consumption is increasing. Obviously, the sales are increasing. We can see all of that working. So, what is our way from marketing to give back to the community, to do our corporate social responsibility as such? So, you probably might have come across the campaign that we recently did around Raise Your Bowl for the frontline workers for NHS. Mm-hmm. Right. So this was a campaign that was just focusing. It's not about Kellogg's. It's focusing purely around, your corporate social responsibility. And our CEO Steve Callahan, he recently talked about in the financial earnings call about the 17 million donations that Kellogg's has made for the people that are in need during these pandemic times. So marketing is not just about selling, driving value for the organization, getting a high ROI, and creating that lasting effect. It's a combination of other things as well. Its holistic view is inclusive of your corporate social responsibility and the other things that Chris and you mentioned before. So, yeah, I think that's where the crux of the story is in terms of marketing, I would say.
That's brilliant, fantastic, Ajay. And I think you're right. There is almost marketing for good. There's a role for brands to play in the wider community and give something back. And I think with a brand such as Kellogg's, as established, as loved, with as much heritage as Kellogg has, there's almost a inherent duty and expectations that consumers have, of a brand such as Kellogg's, to have community in mind. So marketing for good, I think, is a beautiful thing going beyond the sales KPIs. So let's move on to our second question. So I guess in a new normal world where purchasing behaviors are changing, Chris talked about the different phases and restrictions, obviously, to bricks to mortar grocery in place. What are the considerations that marketers should factor in to maximize both offline and online channels? Chris talked to, people flocking online, or we all think people are flocking to online. How long is that going to last, I suppose, is also another question. How are you seeing this play out, I guess, Ajay, in terms of maximizing both offline and online channels from your perspective?
Absolutely. I think I'll kind of steal some of the answer that Chris gave, which is about understanding, taking a step back, actually just taking a pause and thinking, okay, well, what's really happening outside? Okay. In this arena, it's quite easy to say, right, let's go behind e-commerce. Let's just exploit that channel. We are not on e-commerce. I think these are all immediate steps. Absolutely, you can go and think about this. But the beauty is where you take a step back and start thinking about, let's track what is the size of the prize if we go there. Gather the insight from consumers and shoppers when the food trends are changing, when in-home consumption is changing, people, media, consumption behaviors are changing. They're more at home. You know, what really happens is it's the insight that we need to gather and then finally go out to activation. So once you have those insights and when you have done the tracking bit around it, only then you're able to actually take some right decisions. And you probably heard about the quote from Ernberg Bass from Brian Sharp around driving the mental availability and physical availability. There is a big need around now to kind of almost change that and add a new attribute to it, which is around digital availability, which has its own fundamentals that we need to look at. And once you have that tracking, tracing, consumer insight, activation, then you look at the holistic picture of e-com or online and offline social channels together.
And that's really nice, Ajay. Thank you for that, because I think there's a lot of insights, obviously, from data that can help some of that thinking, sort of real-time insights, and just also the common sense, I guess. We've talked in the past, you and I, about data informed decisions, but you've obviously also talked about common sense, putting yourself in the shoes of the consumer. And I'm supposing that that is something that everybody at Kellogg's does on a daily basis. How do you marry up, to build on your answer, how do you marry up the data and insights with the common sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe it's best to take my own personal example, right? I mean, before COVID, I wasn't doing these online groceries, right? I mean, it was an experience. We would go out and we generally buy our groceries from multiple retailers, right? So somebody does really nice fruits, I will go there. Somebody does really nice frozen food, I'll go there. But then after COVID, we don't have that luxury. I don't have that luxury of going to different places. And you want to be safe and secure in the house. We have to pick one retailer or at least two. And what I'm seeing is that even now, when we are able to go into different grocery stores, my consumption or my weekly cycle that I have created on online with our loved Tesco is continuing on, right? So it's just going on as normal, whereas I'm topping up my groceries like every week sort of thing, or a couple of days when you need something from the local store. So I'm even more valuable to Tesco than I was before when I'm buying them from both the channels. But I don't see Tesco as two different entities. For me, it's the shop down the road and then the online, they both are Tesco, So you become even more valuable to that retailer. I think, yeah, that's the beauty of it. Us see everything in different lenses of online, offline, but as a consumer, as a shopper, don't really, it's about the convenience, it's about the availability that comes first, which is where digital availability is the key.
Yeah. And I think what's really cool about what you just said is it's kind of, you've got the data and insight, but, let's take a step back and also think about the reality, common sense. How are we living our lives here? Not everybody's shopping 100% online nowadays. And I love what you said, that this, it's not about online and digital, that's just to the consumer. It's just Tesco or Walmart or whatever the brand might be, Target. So I love that. Now, Chris, sorry, we took a while there. Coming to you in terms of the new normal world and purchasing behaviours, what are your thoughts on online, offline, from a media and wider marketing perspective? And what's going to potentially happen?
Yeah, sure. I mean, mostly, really to build on what Ajay's been saying. I mean, fundamentally, what are we trying to do? We want to maximise the opportunity for people to purchase, and one sort of fundamental rule of doing that is to market, advertise the right product, at the right time, the right place, at the right moment. Just because more sales have flipped online doesn't mean that everyone's media consumption has flipped online. yeah, there have been huge increases, certainly in the more strict lockdown periods in consumption of TV, in anything that's consumed in the house, and that can include podcasts, radio, magazines, whatever it may be. People were consuming their media in the house, and even though we're now beyond lockdown, who knows what's going to happen next month? We'll probably all be back in it again. But even as people are moving around more, there is still more consumption going on in the house. That's important. That's fundamental about where they're consuming their media. Where they're fulfilling that sale, I would argue it matters a good deal less. There's no point in pushing all of my ad spend, ad dollars online just because a big chunk of my sales are now realized online. People are still consuming their media in similar ways. Where that's changed, that's where you should make a change in terms of how you advertise. But don't fall into the trap of just thinking because more sales are realized online. Are people even viewing that many more sort of advertisements? Yes, again, possibly, but that's down to media consumption, not about down to where sales are being realized. And I think just to sort of finish off that, what matters, as it always has mattered, and we've talked a little bit about the fundamentals already, and I think it's worth just reiterating that. What is the path to purchase? What is that journey? How and when can we influence consumers on that journey as they sort of end it with buying a product? And that is what matters. It doesn't really matter so much where those sales are realized, apart from the impact that has on potentially media marketing consumption.
That's brilliant. Fantastic, Chris. And a question for you then on what you said, and I think you're taking obviously a very seasoned approach here, which is let's just not assume that all purchases are realized online. I guess the question is that if we're sort of thinking about consumers spending a lot of time in front of their laptops as we are today, holding a mobile phone or watching more Netflix or just consuming a lot more screen time, and advertisers potentially trying to optimize that with advertising, is there an opportunity for some advertisers to surprise and delight in non-digital channels? Is there an opportunity to kind of actually go the other way and go outdoor? Assuming that some people will be driving around and walking around or using other media in intelligent, clever ways because they potentially could be cutting through better.
I think, I mean, I would think that's a very good point, and it comes back to out of home advertising, cinema advertising in the weeks in April probably wasn't a great use of your dollars. People weren't outside, cinemas were closed, etc. Clearly. However, it always comes back to sort of almost how much is it costing you to be effective in that media, in that channel? How much is it? What is the cost per effective reach point in a way? If out of home rates tumble because the demand isn't there, people are still out of the house more so at the moment than 2 months ago. Especially if you're doing something, as you mentioned, sort of unique, different in that channel, then it can be a very good way of doing it. It's much more important, I would say, to think about the cost to effectiveness sort of ratio of your advertising investment across channels. And if you can do something that no one else is doing, you're more likely to cut through. That makes that each reach point, each effective reach point, even more so. So yeah, it's a very good point.
Brilliant, fantastic. So next question, I guess we talk about private label. So there is an assumption, I guess, and a lot of research, and there's been a lot of articles that, in times of recession, people are more likely to switch to private label. And then I guess if you're making that assumption, and let's say that assumption is correct, and let's challenge that assumption, how do you maintain the relevance of the brand? Ajay, let's kick off with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. No, thank you. Great question again. Absolutely. It's let's just again take a step back. I'll start my answer the same way like I did the last one, which is about, if you think about 2008 recession, right? What was the learning out of it? Absolutely, what you said is right. People moved from branded goods to private label in order to cut their spends or in order to trade down. but there was more to it than just switch to private label, right? So let me just break it down slightly. So if you think about it, they moved away from small convenience stores, local stores, to hypermarket and supermarkets. They moved from local stores to discounters. And when they moved those channels, they actually moved to private label as well at the same time. And in response to that, what brands did, they went in and did aggressive promotion, they did pricing. Well, what ultimately the customer wants to do, or the shopper wants to do, is cut spend and trade down as such, right? If you think about like recession, okay, so in 2008, the recession was about, say, 15 months technically, and I'm just quoting this from the Mintel and Kantar studies that were done. But in order to build the confidence of the shoppers and consumers, it took about 6 years in the UK to do that, right? Whereas if you compare this now to 2020 recession, which Rishi Sunak will say, it's the deepest recession that we have seen in the UK so far, right? And combined with that, it's a pandemic recession. So it's not just like a regular 2008 recession, where it was all about value, all about getting the best deals, shop around, go to different places. It's a pandemic recession. And what comes with pandemic recession is hygiene. You want to make sure what you're buying is hygienic. You want to make sure what you're getting is nutritious value. You want to make sure that the products that you're consuming and that you're giving to your children and your family are superiority. They have product superiority. And because of these things, right, that switch immediately to private label becomes slightly trickier. Because what we have seen is, again, I'm quoting these studies from Kantar and Mintel, what is important to our consumers? It's hygiene, they want natural ingredients, they don't want processed foods, and they're looking for locally sourced foods, right? So these were the three key things that came out of this. And our products, our offerings, again, I'm very specific to Kellogg's, our offerings are exactly in that direction. They are hygiene, they're trusted and loved. So the appeal is increasing. And we have seen that in our data, right? I mean, during this COVID, during this pandemic time, we have seen in-home consumption increase, and we have seen people actually that left us came back. We have lapsed user that came back, and we have new users, new penetration coming in. So there is a lot of changes that is happening, which is different to 2008. So saying a blanket statement that people will go to private label might not be so true. And there are different nuances that we should consider in this. And there are various things that we are doing within Kellogg's to make sure that we are retaining those customers. We are making sure that those shoppers stay with us just because the food that we are offering. And I don't know if you've in terms of the food offerings is one thing that I'm also thinking about the pack sizes that we have to make sure that people are not everybody is the same, right? Not everybody is looking for nutritious value. Some people also want to cut down their budget because everybody's financial circumstances are different. So create a price packaging architecture so that there is an entry-level pack and then there is a family pack for people that want to spend less, or the people that want to just reduce their price per kilo as such. So if you offer those things, you can actually somehow safeguard your business during these recession times. And obviously, Chris touched about the increased investment in above the line. This is very proven. Even in 2008, the manufacturers or the companies that went heavy with above the line support came out stronger after the recession. And that's our strategy. If you again, I'm coaching my CEO's financial learning call. That's what was discussed. We kind of went out to the stock market and said we will be going heavy in H2, so half year this year. Basically, we'll be going heavy in, and there is a reason behind it. We want to come out stronger out of this recession, and that's how we will safeguard ourselves from private label. Does that help?
That's incredible. Yes. And I think what I love about what you were talking about there is the need to demonstrate value and understand consumers. Again, let's put ourselves in the shoes of consumers. You know, if I'm a family, what size pack of cereal, for example, do I want to be buying? If I'm, you know, if I'm thinking about coming back, what are my considerations there? But also, I think, you know, you're absolutely right to say, let's not treat this recession the same as the last one. This is now being termed as the first natural disease-driven recession of modern times. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but that is what it is. It's not a like-for-like situation, and therefore consumer mindset will be different. There's a lot of comfort to be had in brands that we trust and love, and people will go back to them. Chris, from your perspective, you know, from a perspective of, you know, spend, I suppose, in brand versus pricing promotions, retaining the value of the brand during a recession. And I know, you know, we at Game Theory, and you've also written a lot about this around sort of short-term, medium and long-term investment. What are your thoughts there? You know, should we be concerned, or actually, or should brands be concerned, or actually is there something that they need to do to kind of really work through that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd say is I just made a note of your naming conventions. The first disease-driven recession of modern times. It doesn't quite roll off the tongue like the GFC does in some ways, but yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, first of all, it's worth noting, and I think, AJ, you touched on this, look, it's not, private label didn't come into being in 2008. It's been a challenge for many years. And now, clearly in a world where, what was it, the UK dropped GDP by last quarter, 20%, 20.4%, you know, clearly in a world where that has happened, household budgets, purchasing power is much more likely to be squeezed. Absolutely, that is a fact. And I think it's also a fact that brands have gone under. Brands have already, shops have closed their doors. Brands are cutting back. Companies you know, many old and venerable companies are closing their doors. This will continue. It will be, you know, hard times. That was another potential book title. But in that, there is an opportunity. You know, just because certain types of brand are deemed too expensive, people move down, trade down into cheaper products, private label. There is an opportunity there, both for new entrants into the market, but also for the more established brands. I think the point you make, AJ, and I think you both mentioned it about, you know, entry-level pack sizes. That's got to be crucial. It's much more than just, you know, make sure you keep up with your brand spend at this time because the brand is the only thing that's gonna see you through this recession. That is important, absolutely. But a much wider picture of marketing, including sort of colleagues within sort of, you know, manufacturing, product sizing, RGM, whatever. That price positioning on entry level sizes, which brands typically have much more sort of sizable offerings there than private label do, which don't typically have the same number of sort of pack sizes, multi-packs, big, small, whatever. That's going to be crucial. You're not going to be able to defeat private label, win that on price and promotions at this time, because even if you cut price down to as low as you can and do more and more promotions, you're still going to be more expensive than private label. So you need to give consumers another reason to buy that brand. That's not straightforward, but it's a picture that is much wider, I think, than just let's keep investing in the brand. That is important, but it's a holistic picture. It's about how you're coming across to consumers with the right product, the right place, the right time. And one last point, I think, Claudia, and you mentioned it, is that to a certain extent, people will take solace in the bigger brands, the well-known brands. You know, it's going to be trickier for certain types of industry sector, and that's important. You know, it's a different sort of world for different categories. I mentioned this at the start that, you know, Kellogg's, many food products, staple products, had a very good Q2. How that plays out longer term will be more tricky. Other types of product had a very difficult Q2, but they're sort of coming back a little bit. Where you are in your category, what sort of category you are, will have a huge impact on your relevance and how you can keep people attuned to buying your brand rather than trading down for a cheaper option.
Brilliant, fantastic. Did you want to build on that, Ajay? You look like maybe you want to say something.
No, because I heard Chris talk about offering, variety, taste. I think these are all key ingredients to what Kellogg is doing, right? I mean, we want to make sure that we have that price pack architecture. We want to make sure that we are giving the consumers what they need in this time, okay? I don't know if you've heard about this one, right? It's called a lipstick effect. So it's basically a pick-me-up sort of thing in the time when people are not able to afford a lot of luxury things, okay? So the sales of lipstick and makeup and mascaras, they actually go up during these kind of times. And that's something you can look up. I mean, just Google lipstick effect or mascara index, it will come up. But basically where I'm going with this is it's our products, some of our products, which are highly indulging, right? So if you take extra or crunchy nut granola, they are highly indulging, highly chocolate, dark chocolate flavors that come in, you know. What that gives you is it gives you that indulging flavor. And that's something that consumers need and the shoppers need at times. You know, they just want to, they don't want to splurge a lot of money for something. And they just want to create the best moments for themselves. And that's where this lipstick effect comes from. And I think what Chris touched upon in terms of offering variety, taste, indulgence is a key to defend yourself from private label.
I love that. I love that. So they can't afford to buy the full the handbag, the designer handbag. I'll buy the designer lipstick basically to make myself feel good. That's such a cool analogy. Say again, Chris.
I was just going to say, I mean, if everyone's wearing masks, though, is it going to be the lipstick effect again, AJ, or did you say mascara is more likely this time?
Actually, funny enough, like, I mean, I did see, I was looking up this lipstick effect, and in 2020 pandemic recession mascara index. Like, Google it up, it will come up, and I was like, wow, didn't even think of that, but that might be the reason because of the mask, Chris.
Oh, I feel bad for lipstick manufacturers during this time. Tough time. So I am having a question here from the audience. I kind of knew we were going to get this question on this section here, which is how to justify investment in brand to the CFO. Chris mentioned, you know, the finance folks earlier on at the start of the call, and you know, look, if not all brands will be in a privileged, lucky position to have, you know, data and analytics, speaking to finance and the board inherently convinced in the power of the brand to drive business growth. That's you know, it works in some organizations, it doesn't in others. At a time when budgets are being slashed, if you are approaching your CFO with a request to invest in a brand campaign, for some it's tricky, and I'm getting some questions on how to do that. How do you convince or put a good case forward for a better balance between brand and promotion / pricing? Chris, I'm gonna go over to you this time to start that one off.
Yeah, thanks. Almost the eternal question, isn't it? I mean, this is obviously exacerbated at the moment with budgets as tight as they are and times as tough as they are. But it's a question that we've been analysing in the industry since, you know, at least a decade. 2008, I think, was the first time that the long and the short of it came out. So it's not easy. You know, finance directors are under pressure, and it's also not. It's not as simple as saying what is the famous sort of Benetton Field rules of 60% of your advertising into brand versus sort of activation strategies. It's all very well spouting that at your FD, but if you've got revenue targets to hit this quarter, it's difficult to make that case. I think as much as anything, it is about the underlying fundamentals of the brand and the way that brand advertising drives much longer term effects won't have changed in this world. Some brands, as I said, will go under anyway. They won't have the ability to weather the storm. And if that's the position a brand finds itself in, then maybe, you know, trying to sort of start with a brand strategy at this time isn't the best thing to do. You know, batten down the hatches, really sort of try and see that out. But that not all brands will be in that position. In fact, most of them won't be. And for those brands, as I said, the fundamentals won't have changed. We've seen proof. We've done research ourselves with ThinkVox and sort of on the longer term sort of effects of advertising. Ajay and I have done this work together with Kellogg's, and you can prove that brand advertising now will pay back much more over the longer term. That won't have changed in this recession. Sometimes that answer isn't going to be good enough for the FD, and then I would argue, do your research, get together as much industry and brand specific information as you can and make that case. And maybe it just comes down to being able to be a good enough salesman to take that to the FD and make that case strongly enough.
Brilliant, fantastic, Chris. Ajay, I don't know if you have any thoughts to add to that. I suppose maybe Kellogg's isn't in the position of having to really very, very hard, you know, fight that battle in a big way, because, you know, it is, you know, lives on the power of its brand, obviously. And but I don't know if you have any experience or advice or tips to other marketers out there who are really struggling with this, and it's kind of keeping them up at night, because they know that if they invest in the brand, they might actually come out at the other end better, stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And yeah, I would actually build to Chris's point, to be honest with you. We have done some work together on our favorite brand Pringles and some work on our cornflakes brand as well, where we were looking at understanding the long-term impact of this investment. And it's easy for me to say at the moment, because our product is much more appealing during this time when there are, as Chris was saying, there are other industries that are struggling. So it's easier for us to make that case to our CFO at the moment. But even if it is not easier, I would still utilize all the learnings that we have from the work that we have done together, right? So you have some modeling learnings, you can utilize that and see how you can optimize that investment to make that case even more stronger. So rather than just looking at, you know, what is your brand building percentage of your NSV, so net sales value? So how much are you making? Okay, invest this much. Or using the analogy of, you know, CFO said, just invest 2%, you know, or last year I was investing X%. Move all that away, rise above it, first of all, and look at a portfolio level view. What is my portfolio doing? And how much of investment do I need at a brand level? Marry your strategic priorities together and then go and show the business that, guys, you told me you want me to grow this business, and you told me that your strategic priority is this, and now you're pulling off that investment. It doesn't even make sense, you know. And what we are trying to do is minimize the risk and maximize your value in the short term and also in the long term. So you have to somehow utilize, again, you know, the learnings that we have gathered and the people have gathered in the different businesses, marry the strategic priorities and talk to them in the same language that they talk to you in the beginning of the year. You need to achieve this goal. Well, in order to achieve this goal, we need this from you. So and it's easier for me to say this because obviously, as I said, the product is appealing, but I'll just give you an example, which is I'm quite proud of the work that was done recently within Kellogg's, and Chris and his team was you know, phenomenally helpful in that kind of work that we were doing. It was around taking the learnings that we have from our modeling different brands. So we model cornflakes, we model Cocoa Pops, Rice Krispies, all of those brands individually. And we learned that our return of investment was not as what we expected it to be, so slightly on the lower end. We came together with the marketing team, media team, got together and understood what is it that we need to do differently to drive obviously long-term investment returns as well, but at the same time, driving some short-term return as well. So do both of those together. And this is where the campaign called We Do Breakfast was born, which is focusing on our core products, our trusted and loved products, and giving us that economies of scale from all the brands together, and then driving that return, even in the short term for the CFO, and we know in the long term because of the media and the creative power that's there behind it. So there are ways around it. We just need to get clever, and utilize the learnings that we have in the past and do some advanced analytics around it. So that would be my summary around this.
That's fantastic, and I love that sort of really risk management and assessment and balancing, you know, the sort of short term, long term. And I loved that campaign, by the way. And I think from a consumer's perspective, I love that campaign because, you know, right now we need more variety at breakfast just because it's fun and we need something interesting to happen. And like you say, it's a smart way of putting all these brands together and leveraging, you know, leveraging their collective brand power. Right. So let's get to the final question. And this is a really interesting one, and you know, it could be quite a brave question to ask, but I guess we're now entering. So we talked at the start about informing decisions via data and analytics, and informing, not driving. But then we've also talked in this session about the role of common sense and emotion. And so this question talks a little bit to emotion because we seem to be entering a world that is politicized or politicizing media platforms, right? Which may impact how we make decisions around media investments. So I suppose, Chris, maybe I'll go to you as a starter here. How do you layer this type of emotional decision making into fact-led decision making? So a media channel may be performing incredibly well, but actually there may be other things that media channel is doing that is perhaps not you know, sanitary, I guess, from that brand's perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are two things at play here. One, you've got how to plan optimally across media channels, given the sorts of things you're talking about. And the second is who is making that decision? You know, who's deciding that a platform is or isn't suitable for the brand? I mean, if you go back to 2017, I remember the first sort of big YouTube boycott. I was working in a media agency at the time, and we were planning across YouTube, and dozens of companies boycotted YouTube at that time. You know, Pepsi, I think, Walmart, a variety, big numbers of them. And it was because their ads were being placed next to sort of extremist, user-driven content, and it was a big sort of wake-up call for the platform at that time. And YouTube made significant changes to the controls that advertisers have across that. If you buy advertising on YouTube now, you've got many more ways of filtering out content that you don't want your advertising to appear next to than you did back in 2017. So that's a bit of history. Wind it on to today, and again, there's two things happening. One, that is still happening. You've got you know, Facebook groups, QAnon, whatever's going on, sort of shouting about extremist content, you know, uploading videos. You don't want probably your advertising appearing next to that. That's one aspect of the boycott. Facebook at the moment doesn't allow you to control that where your content is placed anywhere near as well as YouTube. That will change. It will have to change. I think you know, YouTube made that change quite quickly. Facebook will. So for the planner, coming back to that, it's almost not in their, it's not their decision really, I would say, about what media channels should and shouldn't be part of that mix. They need to optimize on the things they optimize against: reach points, sales, business outcomes, these things. It's for the C-suite to decide whether or not certain media platforms, media channels are acceptable to the brand or not. In that first example, the idea that, you know, my advertising appears next to an extremist video, everyone can agree that that's a bad thing, you'd think. But whether or not a channel like Facebook, for example, is doing enough or not doing enough about promoting sort of you know, fair play in sort of elections, meddling in elections, these things, that's a very different concept, because that's the idea of the platform, like Facebook, and it's not just Facebook, as an entity and not doing the right thing, rather than having your advertising placed next to extremist user-generated content. That second one, that will go. Facebook will have to be able to do better there. How brands decide whether or not a platform is actually really in tune with their values, that comes from the C-suite, and planners adapt to what they're being told there, I would say.
Amazing, fantastic, thank you. Ajay, I guess at Kellogg's, and we've spoken about this before, you've used lots of different channels, and we've spoken about TikTok. What are your views on this? When you make decisions not entirely based on data or insight, but then you have to start using common sense, emotion, just gut feel. Let's be honest, gut feel, there is a place for gut feel. It can't be all sort of data driven. So tell us your thoughts around the decision making process in a world where perhaps media is getting a little bit politicized.
Yeah, it's a tricky question, I have to say, to be honest with you. But what I would say to this, in terms of these channels, let's just take TikTok as an example, because you talked about TikTok, right? We did a campaign on TikTok. It was called Genie in the Bottle, right? So we were asking some influencers to go in a Pringles can and then come out of it and do some dance around it. Like, it started with just some paid influencers, and then it went totally viral. Like, we had millions of views on that channel, and there was so much engagement, user engagement. If you compare that to other channels, we were actually, creating incentives for people to do something with the Pringles can, take picture, do kind of these things. But on TikTok, it just went viral, and people were jumping in that bottle and coming out of it. And we were like, wow, this is great. Like, this is where you can say, you don't even need gut feel. You can just see, right? I mean, people are doing it. We are not paying them. They're just doing it themselves. They just like dancing around the cans. It's amazing, So once you get these kind of things, you're like, oh, this is a great channel. But then you have the leaders of the world coming in and saying, we don't want to use that channel because of ABC. And then those things come in, and then you're like, oh, maybe we have to think a different strategy, different way of doing things. So channels have a lot of power, and different channels have different qualities that we need to harness within our brand. And it's, again, as Chris said, right, it's up to the C-suite. If they decide not to use a channel in future because of things, we have to respect it, but we have to obviously put the case together that, these things, that dancing around is not going to happen on any other channel other than this. Okay, so there is merits, there is ups and downs on both. Sorry, I have somebody on the door. I'll just go on pause. But thank you. But I'm with you. I'm not going anywhere.
No worries. Brilliant. Fantastic. Right. So I don't think actually we have any questions from the audience today. And if we have missed any, please, beyond the initial one, if we've missed any, please let me know. You can contact me via the website, claudia.sistini@gaintheory.com, and we can pass your questions on to our speakers today. It's been amazing having both of you here today. It's been really funny. I love the mascara effect and some of the other terms that we've come up with. Perhaps we won't be coming up with the acronym for the disease-driven recession terminology, or maybe we will. That could be really fun to watch out for. But thank you so much, Ajay, for giving us your time today, and Chris as well. And I will say, sort of, stay safe and stay motivated, and hopefully we will all be seeing each other in an office or a bar very soon. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.